You're listening to Trek.fm.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's dedicated rewatch of all 729 hours of Star Trek in honor of its 50th anniversary year. I'm one of your hosts today, John Mills, and with me is my dear friend, Matt Rushing. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing good, John. Doing good. I'm really excited to be here talking about some Star Trek episodes. You know, it had actually been a while since I had watched some Voyager. So, with this block, we really got to dive in. And, well, today we're covering, for our first episode, The Swarm.
Yes, The Swarm. So why don't you take us through The Swarm, Matt, and let us know which episode this is.
Well, this is the episode in which Tom Paris and B'Elanna are on a shuttle, and two aliens beam in, and they try to communicate with these aliens, and they just get attacked. Well, it turns out Neelix says, these are not aliens you want to mess with. Janeway decides to ignore the Prime Directive and say, to heck with that, we're going to go through their space anyway. B side of the plot is that the Doctor is encountering a cascade failure because he has been running too much and adding too much to his personality subroutines. And so if they don't find a way to fix him, they could be without a Doctor forever.
And ever. And it's interesting because, hearing you go through, the A plot and the B plot, I think that exposes sometimes a trap that Star Trek falls into, and I definitely think that an episode like this falls into, which is the B plot is really interesting, and had it been the sole plot of an episode, it would have been a really interesting exploration of human dignity and what it means to, be losing your memory and your place in society and how we treat the sick and all of those sorts of things. But instead it's the B plot, and the A plot is we're going to charge through danger. And it's it feels like the A plot feels unnecessary in a sense. Like Star Trek feels like it's better when it's exploring what the Doctor's going through as opposed to just charging through alien territory again. And it falls into the trap as well of where they often found themselves, which was the desire to make Janeway seem tough. She's the female captain, but look, she's tough because she's going to ignore safety and charge through this space. And it's like, you gave her sort of a lose-lose choice there, because she's either awful because she goes around the space and it takes longer, or she's putting everybody unnecessary risk by charging through some place where they can really mess you up. It's bad choices.
Well, and I completely agree with you, because I think the frustrating thing with this episode is the fact that Janeway is also blatantly disregarding the Prime Directive, that this species has said, don't go through our space, and Janeway's like, well, no, we're going to do it anyway because we're trying to get home. And I think that that's a complete disregard for the rules of Starfleet just because it's inconvenient for them. And it's frustrating because I don't think that should be the decision. We have to go around their space. But, also the way they make it seem like space isn't three-dimensional.
Right.
So is there space, when you think it in three-dimensional terms, maybe their space is shorter rather than longer or something, so you going around it in that way might be different, So Star Trek runs into treating space almost like we're on the ocean instead of we're in a three-dimensional frame.
Right, being in a sphere. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's I think, you're right. It's very frustrating. And the Doctor story, like you said, is really interesting because if you actually, instead of kind of even going the Data way, where we're talking about whether or not he's human, but dealing with it more in the line of like, Alzheimer's and that kind of thing. And if somebody could legitimately say in their life, if they have the decision Do I kind of reboot my life and start over, but I lose all that I've been through and all the friendships I've made and all that? Do I choose that, or do I say, no, it's worth risking all of that so I can keep it and still stay who I am? Like, I think that's a much more interesting moral quandary.
Completely agree. So I think we both give that episode sort of a meh.
But I do have to say, one of the fun things about this episode is that it begins with Tom and B'Elanna in the shuttle together, and there's some nice repartee between B'Elanna and Tom, in which he's kind of ribbing her about, who she's been dating or who she's been seeing and whatnot. And it kind of starts this little bit, I think, of love-hate flirtation kind of thing, which is nice because, to me, I always liked Tom and B'Elanna together in the end on Voyager. Two of my favorite characters in the show. Tom was my favorite in the end. So I was funny rewatching this episode because I was remembering, this is kind of where, season 3 things start to kind of build slowly so that by the time, they finally do get together, there is going to be some continuity in Voyager where they've been slowly kind of, building these two characters together, which to me was really nice. So,
yeah, okay, good point. But now let's turn our attention to a truly fun and wonderful episode to watch, at least in my opinion, which would be Deep Space Nine's Apocalypse Rising.
No, I'm right there with you, John. Any episode where Sisko and O'Brien and Odo all become Klingons to infiltrate deep into Klingon space during the Cardassian Federation Klingon War, awesome.
Yes. This is Deep Space Nine's sweet spot, is when you have people going in, and Sisko is a Klingon. Stop reading my dream journal. That's just awesome. And, of course, it has a great switcheroo at the end where they, it's sort of that classic mystery plot line of you think that the bad guy is X, but it's really Y. And, at the end of it, I actually do remember seeing this episode for the first time. And, when you find out the big switch, it was, oh, what? Did that just happen? Oh no! It was really, really wild. And I think as a result, it holds up. It holds up well.
Well, and what's great too is that this episode, when it first aired, and I remember watching it, we don't know that Martok's going to come back and be somebody who's going to be important. He kind of feels like a one and done here, that he was just this character, and we'll never see him again because he turns out to be the changeling. But he becomes later on somebody that for me is so near and dear to my heart. So it's interesting that this is our first experience with the character of Martok. But I think you called out something that I thought was fantastic in the episode was Avery Brooks as a Klingon. Man, I feel like he just is having a blast.
Yes,
I can't imagine that Patrick Stewart wearing all the Klingon makeup and enjoying it at all. But Avery Brooks feels like he's reveling in the chance to be a Klingon.
I completely agree with you, and that's that's the thing. That's one of the things that an episode like this exposes. Is for me one of the things that I loved so much about watching Avery Brooks, on Deep Space Nine, is when he got those moments, when he got those opportunities to really play with it, to really expand it, to push and do something a little different and a little fun. The guy has such a charisma, just such a natural charisma that just explodes off of the screen that if he smiles or he laughs while he's having that good time, you can't even look at a picture from this episode of him smiling in Klingon makeup and you're smiling with him because you're like, yeah, you're having fun. And I want to have fun too.
And on top of that, there's some great scenes in here because, this is obviously during the Federation-Cardassian War that's been going on with the Klingons. And there's the great moment where Dukat is on the station because he's going to be using his stolen bird of prey to get them to this secret meeting on Tyga Core. And Dukat sees Kira for the first time, and he says, "And Major, you're pregnant." And he's like, "I hope Shakar knows what a lucky man he is." And she revels in the fact that she gets to turn to him and say, "Shakar's not the father." And he's like, "Well, who is?" And she says, "Chief O'Brien." And the look on Dukat's face is just like he's gone white just because he's so... It's awesome. It's one of my favorite scenes in the episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dukat is another great character, and any chance to have him, so much as a peer, is fantastic because he's just fun. Mark Alemo brings such a relish to the character that you're right. Scenes like that, it's so easy to get lost in makeup, and he acts through the makeup the best of. He's up there with the best of anybody that I've seen in, the Star Trek series of acting through the makeup.
Oh, yeah.
And still conveying a character.
Well, and I think, it was funny because this is also the time in which Alexander Siddig and Anna Visitor were in a relationship, and the child that she was carrying was his. And so they gave them a very funny scene in which he has come to the office to deliver her some information, and they have this really great back and forth about whose fault it is that this situation has happened. And what I love is that she keeps blaming him, and he's like, "Well, but after you insisted that we checked on those anomalous bioscans," and he says, "But that was Keiko," and she says, "That's right, but I'd rather blame you." And it's just the same thing that, many a girlfriend or wife has said to their husband or boyfriend, "Look at what you did to me." That's exactly what she's saying in there. But it's the great subtext of what's happening behind the scenes that just makes that scene even funnier.
I agree. I think we both give this episode very high marks. Well worth the rewatch.
Well, and what's great about it is we've been talking a little bit back and forth in our block here, doing from there to here, about the difference between Voyager and Deep Space Nine. And this is really one of those places where Deep Space Nine continues up on a story that it's been working through. And we really also get to explore Odo being human. And the repercussions of what happened last season when he was made human, and the kind of malaise that he is stuck in. And I think the fact that he, even though he's not a changeling now, it was his experience of being one that helps him realize that and who he is as a detective. Martok is the changeling, not Gowron. And I thought that was really nice and really pivotal, that Odo finds out that he doesn't have to be a changeling to be important.
Right. Exactly right. Well, it's been fun talking about these episodes. Matt, if anybody wants to follow up with you, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at MattRushing02. Of course, I'm here on the network doing the 602 Club, our general geek show, which is a blast, talking about all the wonderful fandoms that we love outside of Star Trek. So I hope that you will join us there. It really is a lot of fun as we dive into things like comic book character movies, and of course Star Wars, and great old geeky things like, say, The Last Starfighter, and everything in between. We just try to do it all. You can also find me on The Orb with Chris Jones talking about Deep Space Nine, as well as Literary Treks with Bruce Gibson and Dan Gunther, where we talk about the books and the comics of Star Trek and interviewing the authors. And then there's this wonderful show that if you haven't tried out, you need to. You need to go over to iTunes and look up Aggressive Negotiations. I do this show with a wonderful gentleman. You're going to love it. It's all about Star Wars. So go check out Aggressive Negotiation on iTunes. Now, John, where can we find you?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Aggressive Negotiations, Matt, because I am that wonderful co-host that you're co-hosting with, and I have a wonderful co-host named Matt, so we have a lot in common right here. With this Star Wars podcast.
Man, I didn't know there was another show called Aggressive Negotiations. I'm going to look this show up.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is
We're
crazy.
mirror universe of each other. But then I'm here on the network on Stage 9, the podcast that explores non-Trek work of Trek creators with Mike Schindler. And I'm on a podcast called Words with Nerds with my pal Craig, where we do crazy, zany things in the realm of the nerd and the geek. And look for me as Kessel Junkie on your network of choice. So thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And join us next time when we come back to discuss the 2 episodes, False Prophets and The Ship.